No one really likes to talk about grief. Sometimes people say, you have to let go. And it's very, very difficult, almost impossible for people to let go. This guy played this music, and that was the first time when I started to cry.
I mentioned my father passing away, and I needed to rethink who am I and what is it I want to do in life.
There's no right and wrong in grief. Grief is good. Grief is important and grief is natural. When someone dies, we suddenly realize what is really important for us.
Every loss in life will give space to something new. Welcome to the Living a Life in Balance podcast. My name is Abdullah. I'm the founder and CEO of the Balance Rehab Clinic. My guest today is Gita Chaudhuri, clinical psychologist and head of psychotherapy at The Balance. In this episode, we explore the experience of grief and the many different forms it presents itself. Gita helps us understand the difference between healthy, adaptive grief and more complicated processes where therapy becomes essential, such as when someone is emotionally blocked, unable to function, or burdened by unresolved trauma. We also discuss the role of therapy, not as a way to fix grief, but as a space to support, stabilize, and ultimately integrate the pain of loss. From body-based techniques to imaginative rituals, Gita shares how she helps clients find safety, meaning, and even connection with the person that they have lost. This episode also explores how the expression of grief has evolved in the modern world, how the loss of traditional rituals and communal frameworks leaves many people grieving in isolation, without a clear language or guidance, and how we can create our own structure to heal. Whether the loss is of a loved one, a relationship, a sense of safety, or even a part of oneself, we explore how grief, although deeply painful, can become a transformative part of our emotional lives. I hope you will enjoy. Gita, today we're talking about something which affects or every one of us experience at least once in their life. It's grief. And what is your understanding of grief, and what is related to grief? When become grief therapeutic, or we need therapeutic support to get to overcome grieving process?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important and interesting topic, and it's often difficult for people to talk about grief even. Grief is something that is almost excluded from the normal life, right? But it's something so normal. Grief is the reaction, the response to a loss. Yeah? Grief is a process that we go through in order to overcome a loss of a lost loved one, or the loss of something that was important for us, like a career, a job, a partner, a friend. And grief is actually the process of, getting over it, adapting to the new situation. But grief is not pleasant. Grief is something that is painful, and also sometimes chaotic, and you go through different stages where you really feel down and devastated, and then you maybe dissociate and you try to forget, and you are constantly changing between different states. That is grief, I'd say. So first of all, it's something very natural. It's an adaptive process, a process that helps us to cope and to find new perspectives after a loss.
So it's always related with the loss of a loved one or someone close to us?
Yes, I'd say. We can also grieve, a lost part of our life, as in I lost my innocence, or I lost my childhood. I never had a real childhood. I didn't have this careless time, things like that. We can grieve many things, but grief has mostly to do with loss. Yes, I'd say.
And are there any specific stages we have to go through or we go through, or is it a back and forwards process?
You can't really talk about phases as in first this happens, then that. It's more chaotic, and it's more like, an oscillating between different states, different emotional states that can be real and really intense. But I know that in the literature they often describe those phases, and sometimes it can be maybe helpful as an orientation. First you don't want to accept, and then you refuse, and then you get angry, and then you start to accept, and then you find new ways. But actually, in reality, it's a little bit different. It changes, and it also depends on so many factors and on the individuals and the context, how this process really goes.
But there are stages everyone go through at some point of that process, is what I understand, probably.
Yeah, the process is about going through these emotions, and these emotions are important. For example, pain. Pain is an emotion that is not pleasant, but it shows also, it shows the whole system something is not right. I have to cope with something. That is pain. And also pain creates empathy on a social and on interpersonal level, right? So pain is actually a healing power. But if we ignore pain, or if we get overprotective with pain, it can also become a dysfunctional thing.
Yes.
So it's the same for grief and the pain of grief. The pain in grief expresses actually that we lost is really important for us. If we feel pain when we lose someone we love, then the pain is the expression for that love. So I would reframe this pain and this grief as an expression of, this love and this attachment that we have to things. And the process is to kind of, find a new way of this attachment or of this bond. And also to realize it's gone in the way we had it. Yeah? So it's a transformation process, grief. And it's difficult. So we need a lot of support. We need to learn how to contain all these intense emotions. We need to find this acceptance, this realization that this happened, and that is not easy. So sometimes people can get stuck in this process, or they don't know how to navigate their emotions. So they start to distract themselves from these emotions, or even dissociate and really ignore those emotions. And then these processes can become complicated. And that is actually when it can become a clinical issue also. And also a loss can be very traumatic. It depends again on the context. If you lose someone, like your grandmother dies after a long life, and she became really old, then it's different than you lose your child, for example.
Right.
Or if there's violence involved, or if you had a complicated relationship to this person, that can make it more difficult, this process of grief.
Well, where is the differentiation between, let's say, a regular grieving process or a normal grieving process and a complicated one?
In the first 6 to 9 months, anything is possible in grief. There is no real structure where we can say it has to be like this, otherwise it's not real grief, So it's very individual. And as I said, it depends on so many factors, how grief looks. But after this amount of time, more or less, something should become a little bit easier around it. The processing would start, you integrate, this experience and so on. And after, like, maybe also very often after 1 year, for example, the first anniversary of a loss, everything gets activated again, and people, start to remember again and have intense emotions. And then sometimes it turns out that things remain unresolved. The loss is unresolved. It's not integrated. It's not being processed. So this could look like people cannot get over it. They stay in the same pain, in the same intensity of pain. They can't function in real life. They lose interest in all other things of life, which is normal in the beginning. It's also because it's kind of biologically, it makes a lot of sense. You need more energy to go through the process, so you can't just function normally. You have to retreat a little bit from normal life, right? Because you need a lot of energy and strength and also social support in order to go through something difficult. But if people get stuck there and they don't know how to return to normal life, it can become an issue. Or the other way around, they still don't want to accept. They are still looking for the lost person or for the deceased, or they like I had clients there who are still talking, but not in an adaptive way, but as if they were really there,
Or talking to pictures
which can be fine sometimes, because that would be like creating or establishing or building a new relationship to the deceased, which can also make sense. But sometimes if if the acceptance doesn't really come, it also blocks this, the normal kind of life and coming back to having new relationships to people who are alive, So it's either you totally ignore the grief, or you get drowned in these emotions and totally overwhelmed. Either way, it can become complicated then.
Yes. In a normal way of living, usually a child would experience, or an adult child would experience, a death of a parent, let's say. How would it be different if a parent loses a child?
If a parent loses a child, I think as parents, and we both are parents now, our most vulnerable point is like losing our child, right? It is like it feels so much against nature, and we have this instinct and this intuition to protect our children and to be there for them and all this. So, and also we want to give them a future. We see they have all their life ahead of them. Yeah. So if a child dies, that is a massive, I would say, a severe loss. Almost always a traumatic loss. Yeah. And then if it's a sudden accident, or if violence is included, or even suicide or drugs or whatever, so maybe the parent would even also feel guilty. Yes. Guilt is something that complicates the process of grief, for example. Yeah? And it's a severe loss, so it's very, very difficult to accept something like this. Yeah. So in grief counseling or in grief support, we help people go through this first phase where they need to learn to contain and navigate those very overwhelming emotions and slowly but surely find back to, life. And in therapy, we would also work on the trauma, on the traumatic part, on the guilt part, and so on. And in therapy, we talk about two, let's say, levels of the work. One is the realization, so that will lead to the acceptance, the realization that someone is really gone. And the other side is the relationship. We work on the relationship to a person who has passed, and trying to transform this physical relationship that has ended into something internal, a more, let's say, spiritual relationship, Because sometimes people say, you have to let go. And it's very, very difficult, almost impossible for people to let go of the grief or let go of the deceased one, because that would mean I stop loving this person, or if I stop grieving this person, So we are not talking about letting go. We are talking about transforming and accepting and finding a new way how to love this person and how to be connected to this person, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned also like a process which should lead to accepting that someone is gone. So this would mean that many of people in a grief and bereavement process, they are in denial initially. Well, what's your experience?
Yes, which is a very kind of natural part of grief. The denial is a self-protecting response, because otherwise it would be too overwhelming. If we from the first moment on accept and realize everything, it's almost impossible to cope with something like that, So denial is a natural kind of inner break to say, okay, now I can't grieve. Now I can't go through these emotions. I have to withdraw from it. And I have to pretend nothing happened. And this is why I said, it's some kind of oscillating movement between I accept, I'm in pain, I'm sad, I cry, then I'm angry, then I deny again, I don't want to know anything about it, I distract myself, I pretend it never happened, and so on, And in this process of oscillating, ideally, we can learn to accept, and we can learn to go through this process of transformation.
So this is a healthy process, basically.
In the end, but some people get stuck in this denial because they don't know how to navigate those emotions, for example, or they lack the support, or it's too difficult because the emotions are too complicated, too confusing, because the relationship was difficult, or as I said, there is some guilt involved, or some anger, if people have, for example, difficult relationships to their parents and then they die, it's so much more difficult to grieve. I know that from my own experience than when you really had a very positive relationship. It's also easier than to, it sounds maybe paradox, but it's easier than to go through this grief. Yeah, because maybe you feel guilty then that you had some conflicts with this person who has gone, or unresolved issues. So many things can contribute to a complicated grief. Also, if someone just disappears and you don't know where they are, and you don't even know are they dead, or are they just gone, or if someone commits suicide, it also can feel like a very aggressive act against you, or if someone is being killed by an accident, you ask yourself, why did that happen? And so you're looking for answers, and this is all part of this process.
Yes.
And we need a lot of guidance and a lot of support in those processes,
like friends, family, and
for example. But nowadays, it's also, as we said in the beginning, no one really likes to talk about grief, and no one really likes to talk about intense, unpleasant feelings, and everyone has to be good and well and happy all the time,
And society.
Yeah. So, and also we lack traditions and rituals, and there's less and less cultural background in other cultures. I don't know how, how you see it, but for example, in my family from India, they grieve in a very different way than they do in Western Europe, And in some cultures, like for example in the Western countries, it's a very practical process. You have to go through some paperwork, you have to organize the funeral, you have to invite some people, you have to sort out the heritage thing, whatever.
Transactional, it's technical.
Yeah, very much. But where's the space for grief? For example, in Greece, there are women who come, like they do it almost as a profession also, when someone has died, and they sing and cry and really scream, and it's like a ritual. So they are very emotional and they express everything, and that encourages the family members, who lost someone, to engage with the process, and and to identify with this singing, and the singing helps to express the pain. So, for example, when we help someone navigating emotions, it's mostly through the body. People don't know how to deal with emotions because they are also so disconnected from their body. So the screaming, the mouth, we could say, is the gateway for pain, for integrating or processing or expressing pain. You scream, and then maybe you cry, and but people don't allow themselves anymore to do that, in most Western countries, for example. In India, they sing, they celebrate, they have their rituals, they come together, a whole community. They have these burning gods, for example, in Hinduism. They have beliefs, strong belief, religion, spiritual beliefs. And in the Western countries, this has also, kind of disappeared more and more. So people are kind of clueless. Well, what can I do? How do I? And also, if you know someone who is in acute grief, maybe you don't know what to say to them and what is the right thing. And, so people are very helpless. And this can also really complicate the process of grieving.
Yeah, I feel the same also in the European Western society. It's like, as you mentioned, you get to the funeral, and then after the funeral, you're left by yourself. Even within the siblings, you don't talk about it anymore. You don't exchange what it is about. Whereas in Lebanon, when my father passed away, he wanted to be buried in Beirut, in Lebanon. So we had a funeral there, but the funeral is like a 3 days event.
Yeah.
You have an open house. Sometimes you rent something, a larger room, and everyone is welcome. Friends, families, neighbors, and they can come and go whenever they feel it's right. And it allows the initial process to talk and to express feelings.
Absolutely. So I think it's important. It's important to foster this, to really, keep those rituals, whatever kind of rituals these are. They, but it has to be something that we. And rituals is something that happens automatically and with common sense. Everyone knows how it works, so we don't have to think about it. I remember when my dad died, he died in Germany very suddenly, but he has Indian roots. So we didn't really know what do we do, an Indian or a German kind of ceremony, or what rituals do we have, right? So in the end, we found our way. And it was some kind of a mix, which was also great. And I remember there was this sitar player, this instrument, sitar. And there are special ragas for grief, And it's a very intense music. And this guy played this music. And that was the first time when I started to cry, actually. Before, I just could not, It was a very sudden death. And I also felt like I'm frozen, I'm in this freeze state. And with this music, everything started to release. And these things are necessary to go through the process. And also, as you said, being together with people, having a community, having social support, not feeling alone. And I heard from many clients that after the first few weeks, that is over then. Then you're alone with your grief, and no one really takes care of it anymore. And they sometimes even hear things like, you have to get over it now. Now you have to let go, which is, of course, not possible.
Yes.
And and then the loneliness kicks in. And then you can feel very overwhelmed by the emotions, or it's just too difficult to accept the loss. And then sometimes therapy becomes necessary. And I can also talk about later how we do that then. But because you asked, and if a child loses their parent, that's a different thing a little bit. Children depend on their parents, of course. So it's also a severe loss to lose a parent when you're a child. And most of the times when a child loses someone, maybe one parent, the other parent is also in grief. So a child loses more than one person, actually.
Yes.
Because the parent that is in grief cannot take care of the child in the same way. So it is necessary that the child won't be forgotten, On the other hand, children have less kind of rational filters and concepts, and they have this imagination, and they can imagine the people, like the lost ones, as angels or some kind of spirits, or fairies or whatever.
Yeah, they may accept something more spiritual or something more.
Yes, it's easier for them, actually. They have a more natural, innate concept of death.
Yeah.
And
Depends on the age, probably.
yeah,
to a
depends a
certain-
lot on the age and how you. But my experience is that working with children who are in grief is easier somehow because they are still also more in touch with their emotions very often. And that is something that we can use also.
Probably also as long as they have like another figure for them
Yes.
versus really being alone or losing, let's say, both parents in an accident versus having someone who can be close to you.
Yes, of course. They need someone. They need someone who validates their feelings, who contains their feelings, who explains a lot, and also who is open enough to talk about what has happened, because sometimes we don't want to talk about it, and we actually, when the first approach, when we talk to people who have, for example, gone through a traumatic loss or so, we really ask what has happened instead of saying, oh, it's going to be okay or something, because that is not happening. It's not going to be okay.
Yes.
And it's the most stupid thing to say to someone in this case, but asking with a lot of empathy, but also with clarity and strength and firmness to say, like, what has happened, and showing this kind of interest is more helpful, and then they can talk about what has happened.
It's something definitely. I mean, from an intellectual perspective, we can talk about it in a more calm and easy way. But if anyone who experience a death and of a closed one, it can be so painful, and I experienced this also myself. I mentioned my father passing away, and
Were you around, or was
no,
he in a different country? He was in Lebanon, and
he was on vacation actually.
Oh.
He was in Lebanon on vacation, and it was a sudden. He was still young, and then when it happened, yeah, I was not expecting it, and then you get the information. He was still okay. He went to the hospital. He had a stroke. He went to the hospital, so we traveled there. We could see him, but he was unconscious. So it was already a difficult state, a difficult situation. And but after one day, he passed away because there were.
But he could not talk with him. He kept
unfortunately
being
not.
unconscious. Yeah,
Yes.
He stayed in this coma kind of thing.
He was in this coma, and he was not able to do anything.
Yeah.
So it was very painful because I lost also a person who was my role model in life.
Yes.
So to cope with these difficult moments is also not easy for everyone.
So how did you do this then? What was helpful for you?
It was phases. What helped was to speak with people, to share that there are others who feel the same.
Yeah.
So it's not just me.
You were not alone with
I'm
this
not alone.
Yeah.
We exchanged stories. We talked about memories.
Exactly. That's how you kept him alive at first, right?
Yes.
His energy. Yeah. It's so important to talk about someone who has.
And reminded each other about the good moments.
Yeah.
But still, I had to go through this myself. In the first phase, it was like I was frozen. I was questioning life.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Because I grew up in a way where I wanted my father to be proud of me. Everything I've done, I would want to go and tell him. So, and I lost that.
Yeah.
I needed to rethink who am I and what is it I want to do in life.
How old were you?
This was happening in 2017, actually. So.
Okay. See, but what you're telling me now is, exactly what I was trying to point out. It depends on not just on what happened and when, how old were you, but it's like your relationship with him and what he meant to you, and this contributes to how intense it feels, you know. So so he was a very important person for you and a role model, and a great father figure. And you weren't there. It came unexpected, and you couldn't even talk to him anymore. You couldn't say the things maybe that haven't been said, you know, or you couldn't ask him anything. And
I'm lucky. I knew that he was proud of me. Everything I wanted in our relationship, it was already there.
That's
So I
good.
had nothing I regret or
That's
so.
good.
But still, it was like it started just going through his belongings and reflecting on his life, what he had to go through, the ups and downs, and this led like to rethink: is it worth it? Is it worth it to go some pain or to give importance to certain situations in life? So this led in me to question my values I had until then, and to rethink: what is it I want to focus at? What is it to have out of this life?
I think that's a very important point. Also, like when someone dies, we suddenly realize what is really important for us in life, and that we should really be grateful for some things, you know, and that we maybe should not care so much about other things, you know. So we question our values, and we maybe become aware of how short life is, and that we cannot take it for granted in a way. Is that what you mean? Like,
it's not about, it was, for me personally, it was not about life or fear of life or death. I did not fear death in that sense, but I got this feeling of I want just enjoy the ride, and I want to do the best thing I can do without doing it for anyone. Just me first, my family, and not for others. And this was actually the start and the beginning of a decision to move to Mallorca and to start the balance here.
Interesting. Wow. So it marks some kind of change in your life. This crisis of the loss of your father also was a huge shift and transformation in your life, and that's beautiful, actually. But it was painful, and it was difficult, and maybe sometimes you questioned everything during this process. It wasn't so clear from the beginning, I'm sure. Right. And also, but what you said, also going through his belongings and talking about him. So that was all part of the realization that he's really gone, and that he's no longer there, and that he left a huge gap maybe. But then also, like, you keep him alive. You still love him. He has a place in your heart. And besides other people who also still have a place in your heart, right? So this sounds like a very normal, natural process of grief. No?
It was my process. I'm pretty sure others experienced this in a different way.
Everyone experiences different,
I think in my case, I can say it's still painful. It's still painful in a different way. Let's call it. It's good to think about him. It's painful, but it's also joy, different emotions at the same time.
I understand. And I think that's also important. I think the pain and the grief about his death will never go away, really, but you grow around it, right?
Yes.
It's not so huge anymore, as in there's nothing else. It's still there. And you kind of, use this energy to build something or to move on in your life. That is really great.
I would maybe not have made the decision to move from Switzerland, knowing my parents are there. But this shift made me to make decisions which maybe I wouldn't have done before. So, and this gave me also the realization, every loss in life allows also, or gives space to something new, new realization, new action, new people.
That is true. I mean, in the Hinduism, for example, they believe in reincarnation, but they also believe in this trinity of creation and destruction, and creation, maintenance, and destruction. So someone, and the god of destruction, which is Shiva, is the most adored one, because only through destruction new things can be created. And I think that's a beautiful philosophy. But actually, to tell this someone who is, just lost someone, who is in a very intense phase of grief, maybe wouldn't be the right thing. And I think before you give it will be okay, or he will be in a better place, or you
Time will heal.
yeah, something
This
like
all.
that. So in the beginning, I think it's coming back to our topic here, right? It's important to also encourage people to stay with this feeling of it's painful and it's hard and it's something that I don't want at first. And from there, I learn to accept it. No? Because if we are too fast with giving those perspectives and those solutions, it's almost like we wouldn't validate the pain. Yeah. And the pain is necessary for this. The pain was your fuel, right? To go through the pop, to make those decisions, to make those shifts.
And even if I have gone through a grieving process, it doesn't mean the other person I'm talking to will go through the exact same or has to go through the exact same thing. So everyone experiencing it differently. We don't know the history. We don't know if, as you mentioned, if there is anything pending between our relationship or not.
There's no right and wrong in grief. Exactly. And this is important. And this is why I think it would be wrong to pathologize grief, yeah, or to say it's something. It's not a disease. Grief. Grief is good. Grief is important, and grief is natural. Yeah? Also, it's not pleasant.
Yeah. But grief has also certainly effect on our body, on our on different things. And what can you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, what you said in the beginning, you are just frozen. So maybe your body becomes stiff. Maybe your focus is kind of limited. Narrow. You can't. Some people function, keep functioning, but they stop feeling. Others stop functioning and just feel, But something, it's like there is no balance anymore. You get propelled out of your balance, right? And also cognitively, maybe you start to ruminate about questions like why, and what happened, and or the guilt, or no, or something like that, So maybe it's difficult to just think of other things or take care of yourself or others, right? So everything is like a state of emergency. It feels like a state of emergency, and it is a state of emergency. So all of this, what I'm saying, is normal. The brain is just not functioning in a normal way, but this is the right thing, because it's an exceptional state. And also, so physically, pain can be something very physical, right? And it comes in waves, and sometimes it feels like I can't do this anymore. And then we help people to use the body in order to navigate the emotions with breathing out the pain, similar to women giving birth. Actually, it's not really different.
Using the body to lower the pain,
or also shaking, or grounding yourself when you get lost. But it's mostly actually breathing and the mouth.
What about tears? How, because many don't want to allow the pain, the feeling, the depth of a grieving process. So we don't allow tears. Maybe because we are not used to. I mean, in our Western society, as you mentioned before, we are a happy society. We want to show our perfect image, but we are not used to show weaknesses anymore.
Right, or men are not supposed to cry, or something like this, or you have to be strong, or crying is a sign of weakness, or whatever, in some cultures. This is also maybe something. And yeah, crying is important, but I wouldn't say you have to cry and there have to be tears, but there has to be something that releases the pain and the emotions. For some people, it's crying, but it doesn't come naturally all the time, not at first. As I told you, it took me a while to cry my first tears and I'm an easy crier normally. It's not like I struggle to cry, but in this context, and it's very long, it's like 35 years ago or so I can, but I remember how hard it was, but I couldn't laugh either. I was frozen in my face, and I wondered, like, how can people laugh about something? My dad died, So it's like you become suddenly very self-centered, and which is okay. You need that,
Yes.
I wouldn't tell people you have to cry, but you need something to deal with your pain. Talk about the pain or do something physical with it, using the body or journaling or drawing, painting or listening to music. And music can be a great kind of catalyst to release emotions.
There are also differences. Maybe some people cannot cry in front of others. Others like prefer to do it by themselves. But this is certainly...
Also, there are different ways of... I have worked with a client. She lost her daughter, and it was also a very... she was devastated about it, and she had a hard time to accept that. And she told me in the beginning, I don't want to cry anymore. I have cried all my tears. I have no more tears. And this kind of crying is like a lonely crying, So when you're crying, but there is no response to it, then the crying is not a healing thing anymore.
What do you mean with there is no response?
So if we cry, the ultimate response is someone is comforting you or consoling you, right? Like if your child falls and hurts the knee and starts to cry, you get there and hey, it's okay, what happened? I know it hurts, right? Come on. And then it's okay, right? But if the child falls and hurts the knee and cries and no one responds, at some point at first it will cry even louder and harder and will scream, and if still no one responds, the child will stop crying.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is what I mean.
Yeah, they get numb.
Yeah,
somehow.
so they shut down.
Yeah.
Right? So if there's no response to crying or to this pain, then you just shut down.
And we still need that when we are adults.
Oh yes, especially when we grieve. We can kind of contain ourselves in a certain way up to a certain, extent, but we are still social beings. Thanks God we are.
Yeah.
It would be very creepy if we wouldn't need anybody else anymore. Just ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. But we have also animals. I mean, many have a dog or a cat or...
I remember when I was in Grieve, that was another loss, a breakup. It's also can be, cause a lot of grief. I remember that my dog, she would never enter my bathroom. She wasn't allowed to. But I was in the bathroom crying in the bathroom by myself, alone. And the dog was coming to me into the bathroom and sitting in front of me like, hey, I feel your pain kind of thing, And I remember also when I had to put down my horse, we put the other horses of her group all together and they grieved. But they had to, the vet told me, like, the other horses need to see that she's dying because otherwise they will wait for her.
Yes.
And then they can't grieve. Isn't that interesting? So
absolutely.
So we need also horses or like animals in general, they grieve. But they need something. They need their group, their community, and also they need the realization. This happened.
I mean, it's a couple of weeks ago, about months, we lost our dog, and I grew up without dogs. I had no attachment to animals or dogs, but through my wife, I learned to connect more with horses and dogs and animals.
She's a great animal lover, yeah.
Absolutely, you know her. And about, exactly 11 years ago, we got this dog. Her name was Haya. And she, of course, in the beginning, all the problems being
Puppy.
puppy, but we grow together because she came to life together with my third child, my son, and they have exactly the same age, so they grew up together. She was part of the family, with whatever came, ups and downs and lows. And one thing you mentioned was also, when I was grieving, she came to me. She
Yeah.
felt that
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
and
And they have
there was a
this,
connection.
they have this natural instinct to be with you when you are in despair.
Yes.
Animals have this natural instinct because they are social beings. Dogs and horses, they live in groups and herds and packs.
And they feel us sometimes more than another human being.
Well, yeah, I think every human being feels it, but not every human being has access to what they feel. That's the thing. But the feelings are always there.
With our dog who passed away now, we have a second dog. We have another one, and we knew she's going to die, so we could prepare. It took weeks till she then passed away, but we had time to let go.
Yeah.
But we could see that the other dog went calm and had no appetite anymore, and he was feeling she's in pain. Even after she has been gone, he didn't want it to be that active. He wasn't active anymore. He was very, very, very calm. And so yeah, just animals can be very close to a human as well.
No, totally. And they show us actually how it works, and what matters when we grieve. So what you are saying, we need to retreat, to withdraw, we get quiet. For example, in India, they do fasting when someone dies, also to kind of slow the whole metabolism down, to save energy, really. Yeah. And also because it's a ritual. It's an expression of, no, it's not a normal time. It's an exceptional time. And we need to kind of, we need to praise that, or we need to, give ourselves some credits or whatever, we need to take accountability for, now it's time to grieve. And this is why also at anniversaries or so, people should have their rituals. And sometimes, and you know that sometimes we have clients who have gone through severe traumatic grief, losing all the family or children or whatever in massive, like fires or whatever, things like that. And then it's extremely difficult to, and it can last years, this process, years. And it will never be over, maybe. And we should never say like now, but now it has to be like it was 6 months or something,
Yes, I remember this case. I mean, one thing is losing your children and different family members at one time, but it also may be even more severe if it's happening at a specific time of the year or a day of the year, which is repeating. I mean, every day repeats, but your connection to that feast, for example, if it's Christmas or New Year's Eve or so, becomes complicated.
Many, as I said, many things, also there can be guilt around it, or then the whole circumstances, and it's really important to give space to all these things and to talk about it and to be there and to not try to make it go away, as I said, but also finding a way. And I remember, for example, this client, she was kind of unable, which I understood, to go to the cemetery or you look at photos of her family or so, because she was so scared of these overwhelming feelings, so she got stuck in the process because it was just too much, and I understand. So we had first, we had to work on this, navigating through emotions, taking the waves, learning breathe with it, so that the fear kind of disappears, and that emotions can be something healing and not something scary and something terrifying.
As long as you have someone who supports you through the process.
Like that was a clear, like therapeutic case. So yes, I think then, but we always, as I said, we always need support. We can't cope with grief all alone. I think it's impossible as social beings, but sometimes we really need professional help also if trauma is involved. And then we also work with techniques from trauma therapy and so on.
Yes. You mentioned now a couple times guilt. If there are unresolved issues, conversations, communication with that person who passed away, but maybe guilt is also by, could I have done something about it? It doesn't have to be just related to the relationship. In my case, for example, I kept remembering regarding my father 2 weeks before he was complaining of some pain. So could I have done something? Could I have get him to the doctor? Could I have?
Yeah.
So
yes. Or why didn't I stop him from taking the car, or things like that, or why didn't I do something, or why wasn't I there, or exactly. So we like in a certain to a certain extent, it's also normal that we are looking for those answers because we try to control that situation, by looking for these answers, but guilt is something when yes, sometimes there's also like a realistic kind of responsibility. I didn't take care of my child and then it walked across the street or something, or I drove my car and I caused this accident. And like I had those cases like a few times where people drove a car and they killed someone in an accident. So sometimes we need to deal with a realistic guilt, like as yes, you caused something, and we can, but that is also something that we can learn to live with. Yeah? Guilt itself is also like a social skill. Guilt means like I did something that is socially not acceptable, or that is something that is against my values or morals. So guilt is a necessary concept. But if we stay there, it's a dead-end street.
Yes.
Yeah? So we need to find a way out of this guilt. How can I take accountability? How can I forgive myself making a mistake?
It's a kind of a process of being compassionate also. It
With
shows
yourself.
With others, or feeling this for others, but also
guilt
towards yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But in order to get out of a guilt that is just blocking you or sabotaging you, because guilt can really eat you up from the inside if you stay there, then you have to be self-compassionate. You have to forgive yourself making mistakes, maybe. And that is also a long process,
How can someone do that?
Well, I mean, I have worked with people who killed others. I have been working with like those criminal, violent, criminal people. That was a phase where I worked with those people, and yes, there are so many people who have to deal with their own actions in a way, taking responsibilities. But actually, this is also a healing process.
Yes.
Or like this woman who, kind of didn't see the signs of a train rail and went with her car, and her mother was sitting at the passenger seat and got killed by the train. Like, you have to find a way to deal with this guilt.
Yeah.
People make mistakes all the time, or people, not even mistakes as in by accident, but also because they are looking for revenge, or they, I don't know, or how many people kill someone because they drove drunk, or things like that. So this is something we have to deal with. But I think the concept of forgiveness is important here, and taking accountability.
When I think about childhood and also getting through guilt or difficult relationships, or if someone passes away, I ask myself how much has childhood attachment to do with grief, or is it different intense? Is it a different relationship to that person who passed away? Dependent based on how I grew up and how my attachment was with my parents.
Yeah, I think it can have an influence if you have a very difficult relationship, as an ambivalent, or maybe it was never secure. Maybe a parent was never really reliable, or you still that was a conflictive relationship later or whatever. It's more difficult to grieve because you have those mixed feelings, right? And also attachment issues can also kind of make it harder to go through these emotional states, because only through secure attachment we really learn this sense of self and self-regulation and so on. But that doesn't mean that people who didn't have positive or secure attachments cannot go through grief. So but it could be related, yes. But what you're saying is more like the person I had a difficult relationship with passes away, and then does this have an impact, right?
Yeah, it's kind of if I have a healthy attachment with that person, or if I had like a more traumatic experience or more difficult relationship.
Yeah, as I said, I think a healthy relationship can make a healthy process of grieving more probable. It's easier because a complicated relationship can complicate the process of grief.
I did some research, and the risk of death after a loved one, a close loved one, after a long period of time, if they pass away within 3 months, the risk increases of 66% of the partner to die of a broken heart syndrome, so-called. What's your opinion about that? And have you had any experience around that?
Yeah, I think that has to do with these couples, for example, who really spend a lot of time together in their life, and like really having this kind of symbiotic relationship or attachment where they almost synchronize also physically with each other, and there is some research about it, that, or even, sometimes like twins, or good friends, they have their menstruation after a while at the same time, so those long-term couples, they sometimes really attach with each other and synchronize also on a physical level. But maybe even more interesting is also on an emotional level. They mean the world to each other, literally. So when one of them passes away, it could be that for the other one, like, the life force just kind of disappears with the death of the loved one, and there is no more meaning, or like life will left, and then it could mean like it's just like giving up or following, and also even if it's not happening, I have seen it very often that at least the longing to follow or to die as well is very strong sometimes.
Because they lose the their life force, their
Right,
energy to
or like all
continue.
the meaning, and they don't know how to move on. But then, of course, in therapy we can work on this, So it doesn't have to happen, but the thing is, it can happen very often. It depends also on the age, I think, but I'm not sure about the statistics, but if I remember right, I think it's more often the men that follow the women instead of the other way around. So it seems like men are less capable to stay behind on their
We
own.
cannot live without women. It was the same also with my grandparents. When my grandmother passed away, my grandfather followed her
Yeah.
within the first 3 months.
Yeah.
So he is
And
up.
what was the cause of his death? Like the heart?
I mean, at that time, I don't remember what the situation was, but I knew he passed away just shortly after.
Yeah.
And I've heard about the same situation with a friend of mine who lost his mother recently, and his father passed away short after.
Yeah.
So it is a phenomenon which is
Yeah.
obviously out there and happening.
It is. But it's also it's again also, I think, a cultural thing, because, for example, in the Western culture, elderly people, they are very often pretty much on their own. They lose touch with their families, with the younger people. That is not necessarily the case in other cultures.
Yeah.
And then when their partner dies, they are completely on their own. And it's like if you leave someone completely in the desert on their own, they will die, you know? And I think it has to do with this. But if they have more support, if they have still children or family members around, or social network friends, this phenomena doesn't happen so often. You know, I don't know how it was with your grandfather.
I mean, they had a big family.
Oh.
They had a big family, 8 children, and I don't know how many
And
grandchildren.
they were all in touch with
They
them.
were very close and in touch and every day with him, but still somehow the pain was maybe too big or whatever this is. But this statistics gives me and tells me that we need to be careful, specifically after a loved one passes away, how we deal with our emotions. That we need to seek help and support even more.
Yes, I think we need exactly, we need that community that we spoke about before. You know, we need I mean, even if there's people around, that doesn't necessarily mean it's an appropriate support. But also we need other meanings in life than just one person, you know? Also, already during lifetime, we should make sure that, you know, our life does not rely on our partner only.
Another thing I've observed with some people who were close to a person who passed away, they cannot let go anymore. It's kind of they are addicted to the grieving process itself.
Yes, that can be right. Addicted, maybe not, but yeah, but it's like more like an obsession also, you know. As I mentioned earlier, the focus of the cognitive mind can become very narrow, you know, and maybe it starts with ruminating and, you know, thinking all the time about the lost one, and then it's more and more difficult to think of other things as well, you know. So the focus becomes more and more narrow. That can happen, and then it feels like nothing else matters anymore, right? And nothing is important anymore. And but that is something that we can also deal with in therapy, you know. It is an example of getting stuck in the process of grieving.
We talked about sudden versus slow death. Is there any specifics? Are there any specifics how to deal with, or what is the effect on us if something is sudden versus if we can let go slowly?
If it's sudden, there is no way for us to get prepared. I mean, we can never really prepare for a loss because we will never really feel know how it will feel. But we can maybe, you know, come to terms with the person. We can talk about things. We can solve remaining conflicts. You know, we can be there. We can take care of this person. So there is this sense of self-efficacy. There's this sense of there's something I can do. Whereas with a sudden death, that very often lacks, and it comes as a shock, you know, as you mentioned also. You were in shock when your father died. It was unexpected. It came out of the blue. It just hit you from above, right? And And that is very bad. My father died in the same way, very suddenly, and from one second to the other, it was an aneurysm in the brain, a stem, and actually, after a while, we comforted ourselves, me and my sibling and my mother, like he didn't have to suffer.
Yes.
He didn't have to go through the long process of suffering with a slow death and so on, and that helped us to cope with this unexpected event. But in the beginning, it was really hard because it's just like, as I said, it just completely propels you out of your normal life. There is no way for you to at first to adapt to this new situation. But a slow death with a lot of suffering and a lot of painful processes of disease and so on can also be traumatic. It depends. It depends on how it goes. If for example, if a parent has to be with a child that has cancer or so, I remember a client whose son died when he was 9 years old due to cancer. And it was so amazing. This mother could really find realization and acceptance and this new relationship because the son always said, like, don't worry, Mom, I'll be fine, And this is something that is not always the case, but in this case, she had the chance to start the coping process while the child was still there,
Yes.
together with the child. And that can be something very helpful. But other parents maybe, like, for others, it's very difficult to deal with the fact that their children are suffering at all, And so it depends again. But I think in general, we could say a sudden death is more likely to be traumatic.
On the other side, when something is slow, if I think about, okay, a terminal illness, or this is taking still a longer period of time, but and you have pain and you suffer and you can do less and less with your body or your mind, or even dementia, Alzheimer's. If you lose a person mentally, is not there anymore for you. It's not the same person anymore. It's also kind of slow death if I think about it.
Yeah, that's true. Like dementia is a process of uh, it's a mental death, right? It's very difficult. The person disappears and the body is still there, kind of thing, right? And it's so interesting because if a person doesn't have any memories at all, what makes this person still be a person, right?
Yes.
And if they don't recognize anybody and so on, so then you have to go through the grief even if the person is still physically alive,
Yeah.
On the other hand, if it's the other way around, like with my father, he was also in coma for 2 weeks. So he was completely gone, but the body was still there, and and it was also some kind of like really abstract. Is he dead or alive? The body is there, but just kind of staying alive through all these machines and stuff. And we kept staring at the machines because and the body was so lifeless in a way. Yeah? So death is also a very abstract thing and very difficult for us to understand with our rational mind. And that makes it also so hard and difficult to accept, It's so difficult for us to understand what death is and what comes after death. And we know that people who have beliefs or a religion or who have a spiritual kind of idea about what happens with someone after death makes the process of grief sometimes also easier.
If someone has a terminal illness and is suffering through pain, some people, they don't want to live anymore also by themselves. It's also something difficult to deal with as a child or as a loved one. So how can we deal with like if someone wants to be self-determined to live or to die?
Yeah, well, I think it depends again on the circumstances and so many factors. But if someone is suffering and very much in pain and has a terminal illness like ALS or cancer, whatever, and they really don't, and they decide they don't want to live, they want to end the suffering, and then, you as a family or as partners, you can talk about this. I think that can be a good thing, and it makes death maybe something more like a relief instead of just a painful end of something, So I think that can be a good thing. Then you don't feel so powerless and helpless towards death anymore if you are self-determined. But on the other hand, if someone commits suicide as a violent act, that is a complete different thing that causes so much pain, and also because it's almost like an aggressive act towards the people who stay alive, who stay behind, because they decide to leave. It's like almost, I leave you, I break up with you,
Yeah.
and it's something.
Or also, I don't care about you. It's
Something,
something
I
I did
don't
it
care
just.
about you. I don't mind. I
Yeah.
yes, many people think it's a selfish act, and they feel like rejected by this kind of act, and they feel dismissed or whatever. Yeah. So if it's violent, and the more violent it is, the more difficult it is to accept
Yeah.
and to cope with.
Yeah, I read some statistics, and it's about every 40 seconds someone dies through suicide
It's alarming.
in
Also,
today's
more and
world.
more young people. Yeah.
Yes, it's the fourth. In the ranking, people of dying, it's at the number 4 for between the age of 15 and 30
As a cause of death.
as a cause of death.
Yeah, it's really alarming.
And it's been increasing over the last decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and that's a whole different conversation, I think, why this happens more and more, and why people decide to end their life, or maybe it's not even always a clear decision, but an impulsive act, But regarding grief, it's massive for the ones who stay behind, the parents or, the families. As I say, suicide is a violent act, but it's also an act that affects the relationship very much. You feel like I'm not important. I don't care. This person didn't think of me, or sometimes it's even they want to punish me. They did it because of me. Also, when someone, for example, I had this client whose boyfriend committed suicide after she broke up. So then of course you feel guilty, and it's almost like a silent revenge or something, like a silent punishment. So yeah, so this can also be very traumatic and can complicate the process of grieving in the first place. But again, in therapy, we try to find, answers, what happened. And we are really, trying to explore the circumstances at first. And then we try to work with the according emotions and help navigating through it. And this will help finding realization, acceptance, and a new quality of relationship to this person.
Yes, it's a big topic, and it's increasing. We know that, but just also to understand, for those who grieve from people after suicide, I think it's about 95% have a mental health issue, have a mental health program. So that's why it's so important to talk about what we talk in these conversations. It's the depression, it's the bipolar, it's the anxieties, it's whatever, the lack of emotional regulation or the lack of purpose, and so on. We never we can never know what causes someone to make such a step, but we can get them professional help.
Yeah, I mean, committing suicide, someone has to be in some kind of dissociated state in order to do this. And this is also what we explain to people, who say behind, well, how could they do this? They didn't even care about me. And then we explain that in those moments, they couldn't think about the others. They were completely dissociated from all the other things in life, and this is how they could commit this suicide. Yeah. So it's a dissociative state, mostly caused by some mental issues. Or, I mean, okay, there are these rare cases also where people just really strategically decide to commit suicide because there's no other way out, like politicians sometimes, or whatever,
Yes.
that is because they don't have anything else in life that matters, maybe except their company. And when it's bankrupt, they commit suicide. Or they lose a war, so they commit suicide. They lose a power fight, and they commit suicide. So it has always to do with some kind of narrow-minded focus on one special thing.
One special thing, how they see themselves, maybe.
Yes, how they define themselves
and what they want to be seen for.
Oh, yes.
I've had some experience of friends where a parent committed suicide, and it was because, and the reason I remember was this person was not able to be physically able to live a normal life anymore.
Yeah.
But also he was okay as an elderly person.
Yeah.
But he did not feel in his strength and body image.
Yeah, correct. So, for example, I had a client whose mother committed suicide because when she was younger, she was a beautiful woman, a model. She was known for her beauty and so on. And she couldn't cope with getting older, and she got depressed, and she just defined her whole, self and her identity through her beauty and her youth. And then of course she didn't have any other reason to stay alive, which is pretty sad. And others, they have an accident, they get, maybe they end up in a wheelchair or whatever, and they know how to find new meanings in their lives. So
Yes.
it depends. And again, in therapy we can guide people through a process of finding new meanings, even because the loss of youth, the loss of your beauty, the loss of your company, the loss of your power, suicide is very often an abruptly ended process of grief where people became stuck in, They don't know any exit, so they exit that way.
What if someone expresses suicidal thoughts to a loved one? That's also difficult to deal with. To know someone doesn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
So how to get them help? How to react on that?
Like the one who expresses it, or the one who hears it?
The one who hears it, because they will at the end, if this person would commit suicide, they have to deal with this consequences.
Of course, no. I think I would always look for support, and also I think it's important, finding support for the one who expresses suicidal thoughts, But yes, you're right. Also, as a family member or a partner, or relative of a suicidal person, you need some kind of support. Yeah.
You mentioned cultures. We expressed about the Indian and the Lebanese culture, the Western culture. There are rituals. We know the importance of rituals, and but society is also changing. We lose rituals in our cultural, religious, spiritual way, where in the past we could find okay, if something happens, these are the steps I go through. This is not available anymore for for most people, how what type of rituals would you would you put together from the best you know?
Well, I mean, I'm not providing any, kind of program of rituals or something, but I would work with my clients on, like them creating their personal rituals that make sense to them. But we can sometimes, like, it's just about finding a way to get in or to stay in touch with the ones who passed away, looking at photographs, going through old belongings, finding a way, like finding a spot in the house where, they have their space so that you can go there and get in touch and grieve, but also you can withdraw from this or retreat from this spot and go somewhere else, So these things, for example, make sense. Or having anniversaries or, coming together, like having memorials or things like that, because memories keep the person alive in a way, right? The energy. I really think like energy in a I don't just think that I know it. It's a physical thing, like that energy cannot disappear, cannot go away. It stays, but energy flows where attention goes. So if we pay attention to something or someone, it is there, And I think it's important, but it can't be there constantly. So we need to structure that. Yeah? We need to structure how much space will it have in my life. And in the beginning of a process of grief, it will be certainly more. And then we have to grow our life around it again, slowly but surely. So that we also learn to go back to other things in life. Go back to work, go back to other people we love, to our friends, and so on. Starting to enjoy life again. So I think it's important to find rituals to stay in touch with the deceased and to be able to build a new, as I said, new spiritual internal relationship. But also there are other rituals that are important to express the pain and the love and the grief, like, as I said, music, singing, these things, in modern societies, Western societies, is maybe also, going to grief support groups or something like this, But also there are so many ways, like having a grave, having having a spot, where you can go and where you can cry or where you can bring flowers, all these gestures are important.
You would still see that as an important fact to have a grave and not.
Well, it depends. For example, I never needed a grave to grieve my father's death, but I had a spot in my house, with some flowers and the thing. I had this because the grave was also in a different country where I lived, so I found that way. In some cultures in India, for example, they don't have any graves because they burn the bodies, the corpse, So it depends, but you need something. But you have little altars then with photographs and stuff, So you need something. It doesn't have to be a grave, but it has to be something.
Something you can get back to. Could be a picture somewhere, and that's your to go to.
Or a stone, or a tree, or a place in your garden.
How can we cope with really deep grief when it comes therapeutically relevant, and what type of therapies would you do in your practice?
Grief is having to go through intense emotions and very mixed emotions also. And if it's therapeutically relevant, then it's mostly because people don't know how to navigate these emotions. And then it's also very often because the circumstances around the death are somehow traumatic, So it has a lot to do with trauma therapy. The classical thing, like working through trauma, first stabilization, emotional regulation, but then also, like maybe working with the body very much, but also then finding ways to resolve or clarify complicated relationships, right? Or things like guilt, what we mentioned earlier, or ambivalences, conflicts. So we work through this. And then also helping to find new meanings. That is helping to give a perspective at some point, a new life with a new relationship to the deceased one.
So this is the way if someone would want to work individually with a therapist, but there are also group work, retreats, and other possible services out there.
Yes, I think groups and retreats can be really good for kind of moderate grief processes, because if it's traumatic and severe, it can be complicated also. Because, for example, one person lost their child and the other person lost their mother, and then suddenly they start to, feel like, okay, my thing is like so much more difficult than yours, and then it's becoming complicated. So we could say the more severe and traumatic a loss is, the less appropriate is a group and retreats and so on, at least in the early stages.
Yeah.
But still also, for example, there are so many self-help groups for parents who lost their children due to overdoses of drugs, or self-help groups of parents who lost their children due to cancer, or self-help, so then that makes sense then. If it's kind of covering more or less the same topic, But the downside could always be like people start to compare. But the sharing is something very valuable. Sharing with others who go through a similar process, because then you feel you're not alone with that, you're not the only one, and you can feel a different quality of empathy sometimes.
Is there something which should be avoided, which doesn't help?
Yes, maybe everything that just helps in the short term, like, short-term distractions, drugs, alcohol, like just overworking, all these kind of things that have a short-term relief. I would not recommend. But in the beginning of a grief process, as I said, maybe everything is okay at first, But then then it should be like, it should be in the first phase, but not like ongoing.
Prolonging. And after what period would it make sense to start, let's say, with therapy? Because the first phase is maybe a normal grieving process. When would you suggest for someone to start with treatment?
Yeah, I would say like in the first like 6 to 9 months, grief support or grief counseling is more appropriate, because anything that has to do with the grief could still be like kind of non-clinical, But after a certain amount of time, like 6 to 9 months, maybe we can see whether a process is being stuck or blocked. And then therapy would maybe make sense. But it depends, Sometimes therapy can make sense in a much earlier time, because it was severely traumatic or something. And then we have trauma is always first. Before we can work on grief, we have to work on the trauma, because trauma blocks the grief, not the other way around.
And trauma, again, as we know, is very individual. It's our own response to the circumstance or to what happened.
Yeah, we say trauma is not the event. Trauma is the response, the possible response to the event. But of course, like, how can you respond to something violent, massive, sudden, and or if that then it's, it's just, it would be traumatic for most of the people. Let's put it that way.
If I go back to the question, or to the point of religion and spirituality in the context of grief, is it easier for someone who is more religious compared to someone these days with less spiritual or religious attachment?
I think, yes, if you have some values regarding, a religion or spirituality, as in, there is a meaning to life and there's also a meaning to death, and there is maybe a life after death, or these things can make it easier for people to come to terms with death, and to find acceptance.
Yeah.
It can be a great and profound support to have some kind of belief. And if you are very nihilistic, let's say, it's difficult then to know why to go through all this pain.
Yeah. And where this energy or whatever we are is right now.
Yeah.
So believing
Then it's
in
just
heaven is a positive thing. So what
for example,
can be.
For example, heaven, or, like the reincarnation,
Yes.
or we all go back to the big oneness, or whatever, Yeah, it can be something very comforting
Yes.
to believe in something like this. Or like for children, like they sometimes, when they lose parents or loved ones, they picture them or imagine them as angels, and that really helps them. Like this, they stay in touch, and it's easier for them to imagine those things because they don't have all these rational filters.
Yes.
And so it helps. We also work a lot with imaginative techniques in therapy and traumatic grief processes, to find, not just to find a new relationship to the deceased one, but also in order to, cope with these very physical reactions, like the pain in the heart. You mentioned the broken heart syndrome. So pain can really affect the heart. It is like you have a contraction in the chest or something. Or in the stomach. It feels like I can't cope with it anymore. And using imaginations can help. Okay, this is what I feel here is. Now he's present, he's there, or the person is here now, and I give them a space or something like this. Yeah. So we actually use the intensity, in order to we reframe it, and then we find this acceptance.
There is also this, we give signs and symbols to something happening around us, like this bird now standing out of my window could be the energy of, or this flower, or so. How important is this concept of giving signs and to what's around us?
I think it can be important for people, like, and mostly when people are in grief, they are very sensitive, much more sensitive than when they're not in this exceptional state. And so maybe they are also more open for those signs. As a therapist, I'm completely neutral regarding those ideas about, what the meaning of those signs or whatever. I would never tell someone no, that doesn't exist. And I would never tell someone, yeah, you have to believe in something like this, I think it's a very individual thing. And of course, there is no scientific proof that this can really happen. But I wouldn't also completely ignore it or deny it, because we cannot know. We just don't know enough about consciousness. And I think consciousness is something that has not been understood, really. So consciousness can also appear in very amazing ways. So yeah, I don't have any opinion about it, but I'm open for concepts of people. But I would also always have in mind that if you become too narrow, too obsessed with those concept, and it can also be something that blocks you, you know.
How and what do you think about life after death? Is there a life after death?
Well,
Big
yeah.
question.
Okay, I tell you now. Because I know. No, of course, the same thing I don't know, of course. But I want to believe it, yes. I don't know if it's life after death, certainly not the life,
We know.
that we know,
Mhm.
but some kind of existence, you know. As I said, because I believe as energy cannot disappear, energy will be there. And we are more than our brain and our body. We are more than that. We have this consciousness. So what will happen to our consciousness? We don't know. I don't know either. But I think it won't just disappear. It won't. It will go somewhere. It will have a new way to be. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
But I'm not this very kind of scientific, kind of physical oriented person. Like I only believe what I see or something, you know. And this is also a little bit like old fashioned, I must say, because modern science knows that there is so much more than what we can see or prove scientifically.
Yes, I agree. And when I think about it, you mentioned energy cannot be destroyed. I would say nothing can be created or destroyed
Yeah,
because it's only available what is. It can
exactly.
only transform its form and way and possibilities. And I compare it in a if you look at a boiling water, and let's assume this is what exists out there in life or whatever, and the boiling water brings like these little bubbles, and every life is a little bubble, just in a slower way, maybe in our passive way, and we dissolve back into the boiling water, into what is.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many nice kind of analogies. Like, for example, existence is the big ocean, like a big ocean, and lives are the drops, of a wave or something. And the drop and the wave comes and goes, but where you can only, the wave only exists for a moment, but then it's back in the big ocean and it doesn't exist anymore. It's dissolved with the big ocean. So seeing it that way makes some sense for me. And it helps me also to be less attached with physical, things and life itself. I'm not scared of death. I mean, maybe of the process of dying sometimes, and I don't want to die now because I feel like my kids would be devastated and things like that. So I am in a way, of course, attached to life, but not too much, because I think like, well, it will somehow. It's just a phase, and it's okay to go through this phase, but it's also okay if it ends, and that's part of the whole thing.
That's part of the whole process and the experience at the end. At the end, it's about the experience we gain, what we do in this life.
Yeah. And I really trust in that. And I mean, I have lost my father. Other than that, I didn't go to any like real deep grief. Not because I never lost any other close enough person, so that I really had to go through some grief. But I know I'm vulnerable here, and this can always happen, that I lose someone that I really love. But I somehow trust that I will find a way through.
Yes.
But I can't be alone with
No. And there is a saying in my cultural background: every person who lived never dies, because it influences something. It influences others with their feelings, with their emotions, with their experiences, and certainly through births of children and others. And this gives me also, we surpass our lives with what we create. We create this podcast, maybe we create this someone thinking about us, or we improve someone's life, or we affect someone's life or each other, and this is what's beautiful, and this will surpass.
Yeah.
Maybe not us as a human being today, but this is what we will affect human society.
Definitely. And even if we don't, achieve big things and, like my company will always exist, or my name, or what, everyone will remember me. But it's like, yes, I think every life matters and every life has a meaning. And even if it's very short, and even if, and it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah, it's true.
What would you tell someone who is in a grieving process? Is there anything specific you would like to share with them?
That is difficult to answer, actually, because it depends on which stage and which kind of process this person would be, So I don't have any standard sentence to say or so. No, that's difficult. But yeah, I think I would like to share this trust that I just expressed, the trust that it's something that we can go through, and that it can be a transformative process. And that it can bring us somewhere, but that sometimes it can also be a long process and a difficult process, but it's possible to get through it. Yeah.
This topic was very close to me, and I was looking forward to this conversation also, because that's something really touching everyone, and sooner or later in our lives, and I think it's important to show to the people out there that there is a way out, as you just said it correctly. There is not a way out.
A
I
way
think
through.
a
Yeah.
way through, and it's a luggage we have, and it's something which shape us, and for the better. Thank you, Gita, for being here.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for
thank
having
you very
me.
much.